So tell me, as I pour this bottle, tell me what I'm toasting to for you. Leave me a comment and let me know, what are you celebrating yourself for this year? Now, so many times as adults, we like to skip this step. Our brains find it so hard to celebrate ourselves sometimes. We don't really see it as responsible. We see it as more responsible to focus on the work that's still ahead, for the things that still need to be done, especially if you've got perfectionist tendencies, then celebrating can be really hard because it's so much easier to see where you fell short, what you did not get done or do well enough, than it is to celebrate. And that's why this is such a key moment, because we are going to retrain our brains to celebrate. To be able to look for the positive, despite the existence of negative, to push it aside and say, this is what I'm focusing on and I am going to enjoy it, I am going to celebrate it. If you skip the celebration, you skip the enjoyment. Entonces, hola, feliz sábado, hi, happy Saturday. How are you? Yo soy Nikki de Nikki Bannister Language Coaching y yo estoy aquí para el episodio 82 de Spanish Saturday, y en este episodio te invito a celebrar conmigo. Welcome. This is episode 82 of Spanish Saturday, my weekly live episode with y'all. I am Nikki, a life and language coach, and I am here to invite you to celebrate with me. And I mean it seriously. I want to invite you to celebrate with me before all of my bows fall down. How are you? I always like to start. I like to find out how your week was. Tell me how your week was. For this week, this was my last week of work for 2020. I run my own coaching business for life and language students, and this week, in fact, today was the very last session that I had live with students. Now, for sure, I know I am going to get into more work-related things before the end of the year, but this was my last live session with students today, and I finished my fall language semester for my language students. And so it is time to look back and say, job done. Let's look back and celebrate. Entonces, para mí, ¿cómo fue tu semana? Siempre me gusta escuchar cómo estás y cómo fue tu semana. Pero para mí, esta semana fue la última semana de mi trabajo, de mis sesiones con estudiantes y con clientes este año. Y por cierto, yo sé que voy a trabajar un poco más, voy a hacer cosas relacionados al trabajo durante las últimas semanas de 2020 de este año, pero yo tuve de hecho hoy mi última sesión con un estudiante, entonces no tengo más sesiones en vivo con estudiantes ni con clientes este año, y hoy es el día en que yo voy a celebrar, yo voy a reflexionar en el año y voy a celebrar, y te invito a celebrar conmigo. So this is actually an assignment. Not an assignment. I don't give assignments. I give extra practice options. Practice for improvement. Practice for the journey. I give extra practice options to my students. And this is the last practice option that I gave to my students, but I really don't see it as optional. I really don't want it to be optional. It is celebrating. We are on the stage of celebration. Celebrating is so important, and I don't want you to skip this. So I really want to invite you to celebrate with me. And I want to tell you that, in fact, well, I want to tell you lots of things about celebrating, but first of all, let's celebrate. This is how I celebrate. So when you are celebrating, how do you like to celebrate? Because when I say celebrate, I mean, let's talk about what we're celebrating, but I also mean, let's actually celebrate. Entonces, te invito a celebrar conmigo y voy a hablar de la importancia de la celebración, pero primero vamos a empezar a celebrar, ¿no? Entonces, yo estoy celebrando y Y voy a decir de todo lo que estoy celebrando de este año. Quiero escuchar tus comentarios también, pero la otra cosa es no solo decir que estamos celebrando, pero hacer la celebración, celebrar de verdad. Entonces, mi manera favorita de celebrar depende mucho de la cosa que estoy celebrando, pero esta celebración es personal. Esta celebración normalmente me gusta celebrar con otros. Puedo celebrar luego con mi esposo, con mi familia, pero esta celebración es para mí, es personal. Y es para ti también, es para compartir. So, aside from just saying what we're celebrating, first of all, let's actually celebrate. I want you to do this for yourself, however celebrating looks like for you. I'm going to talk about why I'm celebrating this way so that you get it, so that you know what I'm talking about. So I love this time of the year. I love all the decorations. I love everything to do with that. I've got my champagne here because a big part of celebrating for me is doing something that feels exciting, that feels fun, that feels special. And so for me, that involves, and for you, it could look totally different, but for me, a good celebration involves one of my favorite bottles of sparkling wine. This is a J. Cuvée. Shout out to Sonoma County Wineries. Entonces, algo para mí. La manera en que me gusta celebrar depende de la cosa, por supuesto, pero me gusta tener la energía de algo especial, de algo emocionante, y algo especial, algo que no es ordinario, que es extraordinario, que no hago en mi vida diaria. Entonces, tengo la botella de mi vino espumante favorito, gracias a la bodega de J, que está aquí en el condado de Sonoma, de California. Y yo voy a abrir. Now, there are many ways that this could go bad. Let's hope it all goes well and I don't end up covered in champagne. So champagne is part of my celebration. It's something special. It's something that makes me feel really good. It's something that I enjoy. I think the bubbles are fun and fancy. And so far this cork isn't budging at all. Entonces, para mí la champaña es parte de mi celebración, pero puede ser totalmente diferente para ti. Y eso puede terminar muy triste si yo no puedo abrir la botella. Pero voy a seguir tratando. Yo puse la crema en mis manos, entonces la loción, entonces quizás es por eso que no puedo abrir la botella. Pero mi pregunta para ti, mientras hablamos de la celebración, también algo importante para mí es vestirme elegante, es sentirme todavía cómoda, pero especial. Entonces, para mí es esto. Tiene que ver con arreglarme el maquillaje, con vestirme un poco más elegante, con tener la música de la Navidad tocando en la casa y tener mi botella de champán que no puedo abrir todavía. So I think I'm going to spend the whole episode trying to open this bottle of champagne. So part of my celebration includes part of that special, part of that feeling of being special and capturing the energy of what I'm celebrating here is involved in how I look. For me, it has to do with, doing my makeup, with dressing up a little bit. That's part of my celebration. But how do you like to celebrate? Woohoo! We got it. Because for all of us, celebration looks totally different. Cheers. Salud. Woohoo! So tell me, as I pour this bottle, tell me what I'm toasting to for you. Leave me a comment and let me know, what are you celebrating yourself for this year? Now, so many times as adults, we like to skip this step. Our brains find it so hard to celebrate ourselves sometimes. We don't really see it as responsible. We see it as more responsible to focus on the work that's still ahead, for the things that still need to be done, especially if you've got perfectionist tendencies, then celebrating can be really hard because it's so much easier to see where you fell short, what you did not get done or do well enough, than it is to celebrate. And that's why this is such a key moment, because we are going to retrain our brains to celebrate. To be able to look for the positive, despite the existence of negative, to push it aside and say, this is what I'm focusing on and I am going to enjoy it. I am going to celebrate it. If you skip the celebration, you skip the enjoyment. Entonces, dime, por favor, tengo mi taza, está mi copa, está lista, entonces yo quiero escuchar qué estás celebrando, qué te estás celebrando este año. Y esto es la cosa, mis amigos, que muchas veces, con frecuencia, es muy difícil para nosotros los adultos a pausar y celebrar. Es difícil porque nuestros cerebros, nuestras mentes quieren pasar directamente al próximo problema, al próximo paso. Y nos sentimos más responsables si estamos enfocando en algo productivo. ¿Y cuál es el punto? ¿Cuál es el propósito de una celebración? Eso es el propósito. Que la celebración es donde aprendemos a no entretener, pero a entrenar a nuestras mentes a disfrutar lo bueno. Especialmente si sufres por esta enfermedad, por este problema que tenemos de la perfeccionismo, si tienes la tendencia de solo mirar las cosas negativas, de solo criticarte por el trabajo que has hecho, cómo podrías haber hecho mejor, cómo podrías hecho más. Entonces, esto es el momento perfecto para ignorar esta parte, para entrenar tu mente a enfocar en lo positivo y mirarlo y decir, yo voy a celebrar esto y yo voy a gozarme de esto. Entonces, otra vez, ¿qué te estás celebrando este año? So, with that said, tell me again, I'll ask you again, what are you celebrating yourself for this year? Now, I've been holding this for a minute, so let's get going. Perfecto. I want you to think about what you're celebrating. I want you to share it with me in the comments, and I want to start sharing with you what I am celebrating and what I've already heard from some friends. So I've heard from one of my students is celebrating the fact that she is in a nursing program and she is looking to change her career and become a nurse, and she got straight A's this year. 2020 was difficult. 2020 had challenges and she pulled straight A's. So cheers to my student Amy for a job well done. That is hard work paying off. That is so awesome. Cheers to Amy. Salud a mi estudiante Amy por recibir perfectas notas durante su semestre. Ella está en la escuela otra vez para cambiar de carreras y para ser una enfermera. Gracias. Entonces, ella consiguió las notas perfectas en su semestre en un año muy difícil. Muy, muy bien hecho a ella. También tengo otra amiga que se graduó de un programa de credencial para los maestros. Ella tiene su licencia, su credencial para ser maestra después de 20 años de querer hacer esto. Después de 20 años de trabajar para esto, ella consiguió este año su credencial. Salud a mi amiga Rachel. Special cheers also to my friend Rachel, who has for 20 years wanted to become a teacher, and she graduated and she finished the teaching credential program. this year, in the midst of a crazy year, in the midst of a tough one. So cheers to my friend Rachel. Tell me, what are you celebrating yourself for this year? ¿Qué te estás celebrando este año? And finally, my friend Hannah also made a huge decision to take some time off of work and reprioritize to come home, and because she was working in another country, to come home and spend time with her family. And she is celebrating herself for that decision, for reprioritizing her life and feeling so good with that decision to spend time with her family while they are all healthy and able to spend that time with her. And I want to cheers and celebrate my friend Hannah as well. Tell me, what are you celebrating yourself for this year? Entonces, un salud especial también brindo a mi amiga Hannah porque ella tomó la decisión difícil de mudarse de un país a otro para priorizar su tiempo con su familia y para pasar más tiempo con ellos y dejar el trabajo por unos meses, que es difícil porque ella es muy apasionada de su trabajo que hace, pero ella decidió pasar este tiempo con la familia y ella está celebrando por tomar esta decisión y por el tiempo que ella tiene y está gozando con sus padres mientras ellos están de buena salud y pueden disfrutar del mismo tiempo con ella. Muy bien, salud. Ok, ¿qué te estás celebrando este año? Más champaña para Nikki. Okay, a little bit more. If I'm going to keep cheersing to all of these, I'm going to need more champagne. Now, me. I am celebrating. Now, this year was not perfect. This year was tough, but that's not what we're focusing on right now, right? We're focusing on the celebration. And I finished my last student session today, and my heart was just overwhelmed. I am celebrating every single student, the ones that are still my students and continuing with me, the ones that have finished their part of their language journey or their coaching journey that they were on with me. I am celebrating every single marvelous and beautiful human being that I had the honor to play a part in their journey and to be a part of their lives and guide them on a bit of their journey this year. And I am so grateful for their relationship, for their presence, and I am celebrating the way that we have impacted each other's lives this year. Salud. Ok, pues ¿qué estoy celebrando yo entonces? Y es fácil, estamos casi al fin del año, es fácil reflexionar, mirar hacia atrás y pensar, wow, este año no fue perfecto. Había momentos, había meses, había semanas, había estaciones que no fueron fáciles, en que pues yo hice mi mejor o pues sí, yo hice mi mejor, pero mi mejor no fue muy bueno. O es fácil inmediatamente cuando reflexionamos poner la mente así, pero esto no es lo que hacemos hoy. Esto no es la celebración. Estamos celebrando. Entonces, la pregunta es, ¿qué me estoy celebrando este año? Y cuando yo terminé mi última sesión con mi estudiante, con mi último estudiante de este año, 2020, mi corazón se abrumó el corazón por la gratitud y por todo lo asombro. Yo estaba asombrada, lo asombroso de las personas que estuvieron en mi vida este año, y lo que yo estoy celebrando son mis estudiantes y mis clientes, mis estudiantes de inglés, de español, mis clientes de coaching, que unos están todavía conmigo, unos van a empezar o continuar en el próximo año y unos terminaron la parte del viaje que compartieron conmigo este año. Pero todos, yo estoy celebrando a todos los las personas, los clientes que confiaron en mí para ser su guía en una porción de su viaje en otro idioma o en su vida. Y yo estoy celebrando a estas bonitas personas y el impacto que nosotros tuvimos en nuestras vidas. Yo sí estoy celebrando el impacto que yo tuve en sus vidas, pero también estoy celebrando el impacto que ellos tomaron en mi vida. Salud! Cheers to that. That is a big celebration for me. In fact, I don't know if it's going to get any better than that, but I wanted to do this live because I wanted to show you what it looks like to celebrate. So I am thinking live of all these things, and this is my moment to look back and reflect on this year. And I know that negative thoughts are going to come up as I do this, but I'm going to let them go. And I'm going to keep focusing on what I am celebrating myself for this year. I love to celebrate other people too. I love to celebrate with my students, with my clients. I'd love to celebrate with you. Tell me in the comments below what you are celebrating yourself for this year. Entonces, dime, porque me encanta celebrar a mí misma, pero me encanta más. No quiero decir más. Me encanta también celebrar a otra gente. Entonces, dime en los comentarios qué te estás celebrando este año. Ok. Más que mis estudiantes, mis clientes, yo me estoy celebrando por no rendirme, porque había algunos momentos, no solo en mi trabajo, en mi negocio, pero también en mis relaciones más cercanas en que yo no sabía cómo continuar, yo no sabía cómo seguir. Y a veces yo quería solo rendirme, pero no hice. Al fin y al cabo, no lo hice y me estoy celebrando por no rendirme. Y ahora yo estoy gozando del resultado de no rendirme, porque el viaje cambia, no siempre será tan difícil. Hay momentos duros, pero también hay momentos bonitos. Entonces, yo estoy viviendo un momento mucho más bonito ahora que antes este año y me estoy celebrando por no rendirme antes de llegar a este punto. So I am celebrating. Another huge thing I'm celebrating as I look back at this year. I am celebrating myself for not giving up. And I'm not even just talking about my work. It got tricky. It got hard at different points to say, hey, I don't know if I'm making enough money to keep going, kind of a thing. I don't know if I'm serving people in the right way. So it was tough not to give up in my business, in my work, but it was also tough not to give up in other areas. It was really tough. Gracias, Vanessa. It was really tough not to give up on certain relationships, in some of my absolute closest relationships. And that's how journeys go, right? There are peaks and there are valleys. There are really difficult moments and there are really awesome, beautiful moments. And earlier this year, I was in a really tough moment in different ways. For a while, for a minute, I stayed there and it was tough, and I didn't know how to keep going, and it was really tempting to give up, but I didn't. When it all comes down to it, I just didn't give up, and now I am living a much more beautiful moment and a much more beautiful and enjoyable part of the journey than I was earlier this year. And the only way that I got to this moment where I'm up again on a peak, the only way that I got to this moment was by not giving up when it was at its toughest. And so I am celebrating myself for not giving up this year, even when that was all I could manage to do. Cheers to that. Salud por no rendirse, por no rendirme. Now, those are the really big ones. Let's get some specifics in there, because celebrations don't have to be huge and monumental and life-changing. They can be simple, they can be small. The more we learn to celebrate, the easier it gets and the more enjoyment we have. Entonces, estas celebraciones fueron muy grandes, muy importantes, muy monumentales, pero esto no es el único tipo de celebración, la única celebración que podemos tener. Es excelente celebrar estas cosas grandes, importantísimos, pero podemos celebrar las cosas más pequeñas, más específicas también, porque por lo más que celebramos, lo más fácil es celebrar. Y también tenemos más gozo, tenemos más placer cuando celebramos, cuando aprendemos a celebrar más. Entonces, ¿qué son las cosas pequeñas que te estás celebrando este año? Sorry, Spanglish, so tell me, what are some of the smaller things? Not life-changing, but what are some of the smaller things that you are celebrating yourself for this year? Now, for me, I read, thinking about it, okay, I read at least 2 books in the spring. I read at least 3 books in the summer, so that's 5. I read at least 2 more books in the fall, and I read at least 1 more for fun, so I'm at 7, I'm at 8. I read at least 8 books in my second language this year. Gracias, Analia. I read 8 books in Spanish. I think that's a record. I don't know if I've ever read and finished that many books in my second language this year. I am stoked. I am celebrating myself for reading 8 books in Spanish this year. And on top of that, for reading a ton of books in general, but 8 books in my second language. And every time I read, it keeps getting easier and easier. It keeps getting better. I tell my students this all the time too. It really is a new experience with every book. But I read 8 books in Spanish and I'm stoked on that. So cheers to that. What are you celebrating yourself for this year? Salud primero. Yo terminé leyendo, al fin cuando yo sumo, yo terminé leyendo por lo menos 8 libros en español en mi segundo idioma este año. Y encima de esto, sí, yo estaba leyendo muchos libros por lo general, pero 8 libros en español es muy bueno, quizás es el récord para mí. Entonces, me estoy celebrando por terminar de leer 8 libros en mi segundo idioma este año. Y inmediatamente la tentación para mí también es poner una meta en el próximo año. Oh, quiero leer más, puedo leer 12 en el próximo año, 1 cada mes. Oh, yo puedo leer en francés en mi tercer idioma, puedo terminar un libro en francés el próximo año. Pero, no. Esto no es el momento. La celebración es separada que la meta. Estamos celebrando y aprendiendo a celebrarnos. No vamos a poner más metas en este momento. Vamos a celebrar. So here's the thing that comes up when I do that, right? When I talk about, hey, I finished 8 books in Spanish in my second language this year. There's an immediate temptation. This is where my mind goes. This is why we're doing this live. There's this immediate temptation to say, oh, let's make a new goal. Maybe I could beat that next year. Maybe I could read 12 books next year, 1 for every month. Or maybe I could finish reading a book in French in my 3rd language next year. That would be a way to top this. I could do that. And that's the temptation, right? There's an immediate celebration and then how can I do more? How can I do better? And that is exactly where I want you to stop your mind if it's going there. I want you to go, freeze. I am celebrating. I am not setting goals. Both of those things are valuable and awesome, but they are separate. This is a moment for celebration. We are learning how to celebrate ourselves. We are learning how to enjoy the good stuff. And setting goals is separate. That comes at a later time. So if your mind goes there, if that's a temptation, push it off, keep it separate. We are celebrating. What are you celebrating yourself for this year? ¿Qué te estás celebrando este año? Ok, más. Yo puedo continuar infinitamente, yo estoy segura, pero voy a pensar en por lo menos una o dos cosas más que me estoy celebrando este año. I'm sure I could keep going, especially as we get really small. I could keep going with celebrations infinitely, but I am going to make sure I name one or two more before we wrap this up, and I would love to see your comments about what you are celebrating this year. So, ¿qué más? What else am I celebrating this year? Okay, that was an easy one. As I stopped and I took a sip there, I'm looking around, and where I am right now, I am in my dream office. I am in this awesome workspace that totally reflects me in every way, that is the ideal space for me to work from home and be with my students and also do yoga and meditate. And I've got this great little corner for my dog over there. And this office is amazing, and it didn't exist at the beginning of this year. It was a room that we had rented out, and it was in pretty bad shape. And I completely converted it, and I'm celebrating myself for making this space, and not just for making this space, but for breaking it in, for the way that I used this space this year, for the way that this space has served me, something that I created, that I manifested, if you will, and that is here and that I have made my own and made a part of my life. And not to overlook it, but to really celebrate it. It's brand new. This office is an office of 2020, and it is brand new, and I'm going to celebrate it. Entonces, otra cosa que yo puedo celebrar, pero primero, otra cosa que me estoy celebrando cuando miro a mi alrededor, donde estoy ahora, estoy en mi oficina. Estoy en la oficina de mis sueños. Estoy en mi oficina perfecta. Y esta oficina no existió antes de este año. En enero de este año, hace 12 meses, esta oficina fue un cuarto rentado a otra persona y no estaba en muy buena condición. Pero yo cambié prácticamente de todo en este cuarto y yo formé la oficina de mis sueños. Y no solo eso, no solo creé el espacio, no solo manifesté, si podemos, el espacio, pero yo lo hice mi propio. Yo lo hice el lugar y yo llené este espacio con memorias de sesiones con estudiantes. Prácticamente no salí de esta oficina este año porque estábamos en casa, ¿no? En la cuarentena todo el año. When you think about it, I didn't even leave this office this year because we were in quarantine, so everything happened here. Entonces, es un espacio nuevo, manifestado de mis sueños, pero que yo llené con el trabajo, con las relaciones, con todas las cosas importantes de mis sueños. Esto es donde las vidas, incluyendo la mía, cambió. Las vidas cambiaron. Entonces, me estoy celebrando por crear y por llenar este espacio en la manera que yo hice. Celebrating, creating, and filling this space the way that I did. All right, let's do one more. What are you celebrating yourself for this year? ¿Qué te estás celebrando este año? You know, when I say one more, I'm like, better make it a good one. Entonces, cuando digo que voy a decir una última cosa para celebrar que, debe de ser la mejor cosa. Para celebrar también, recomiendo que tomes un momento de reflexión para meditar en este año y en todo lo que te trajo. I do recommend, and this is exactly what I'm doing now, as you celebrate, that it's a reflection. It's a time to reflect on this year and pick out all the best moments and all that there is to celebrate about 2020. And with that, as you do that, you might need some space. You might need a lot more to close your eyes physically, internally, maybe journal, maybe just take a few deep breaths and meditate. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now. And allow yourself to go back and reflect and look over this year and allow those good things to come to mind. And you know what? If the bad things pop up, that's okay. Just let them keep passing through your mind and find what your mind settles on that's good. Let's take a moment and just do 3 deep breaths together. Vamos a respirar y reflexionar. Con 3 respiraciones, cada uno más profundo. One more deep breath, the deepest of them all. And now tell me what good things came into your head. And if you need to pause, keep breathing, do that until the good things, because we can't force this. Just let it go and surrender and they will come into your head. Entonces, no hay que esforzar nada, pero déjalo y las buenas cosas van a llegar a tu mente. Ok. Yo me estoy celebrando este año. Por escuchar a mí misma, aprender a escuchar más a otros, a mí misma y a Dios. Y por formar una fundación fuerte en mi salud. Porque yo estaba viviendo a veces concentraba en la salud física, a veces en la salud mental o emocional, pero raramente estaba concentrando en todos los áreas de mi salud juntos, incluyendo lo que estaba sufriendo más fue mi salud espiritual. Y cuando la pandemia empezó, yo me di cuenta de que no podía seguir así. Entonces, me estoy celebrando por combinar todo y por mirar mi salud en una manera holística y por crear una fuerte fundación en todas áreas de mi vida este año. En mi salud, como hablamos hace 1 o 2 episodios, en mi salud mental, emocional, física y espiritual. Y me estoy celebrando porque sin esto no creo que yo pudiera haber logrado nada que logré. Que yo estuviera en el lugar donde de verdad estoy hoy. No. Sin atender a mi propia salud en todas estas áreas, yo no estaría aquí y lista para servir a otros y para ayudar a otros que necesitan el apoyo. Me estoy celebrando en esto. Okay. So that was the one. As I closed my eyes and just reflected and let it come to my head, what really came up was I'm celebrating myself for really learning to listen to others, also to myself and my own body, and to God. And what comes up with that is really celebrating listening at the beginning of the pandemic, at the beginning of quarantine, realizing that I could not keep going the way that I was and how I had been going as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a coach and everything. The way that I had been going was in sometimes focusing on my physical health sometimes focusing on my mental, my emotional health, but rarely focusing on all of those together. And the one that was really suffering the most, as we've talked about 1 or 2 episodes ago, the one that was really suffering the most was my spiritual health. I really wasn't focusing on that as a vital area. And what happened is when the pandemic hit and quarantine hit is I just realized I couldn't keep going the way that I was. And so I started to put a strong focus on treating my health holistically, putting all of those together. And what I am celebrating now is I am really celebrating myself for creating a really strong foundation of health in all 4 of those areas, because it served me not only to get through my own shit and to get through the pandemic, but it served me to get to the place where I am now, where I'm feeling extremely healthy, extremely strong, and where I'm feeling so excited and so ready to help and serve others who need support in one or all of those areas, who need support to be healthy so that they can then pursue their best life, whatever that looks like for them. And I'm celebrating myself for doing that, for realizing that it needed to be done, and for doing it and doing it consistently, because your health isn't just something you fix and then it's done, right? Your health is something that's a daily practice. So I am celebrating myself for all of that. Those are my celebrations of 2020. What are you celebrating yourself for this year? From big to small, what are you celebrating yourself for this year? Please share with me in the comments. Entonces, estas son mis celebraciones. Y claro que yo puedo crear más, pero para este episodio, ya me estoy experimentando las burbujas. Entonces, un buen momento para terminar, ¿no? Ok. Estas son mis grandes celebraciones de 2020. Fue un placer compartir esta celebración contigo, pero no es completo, al menos que compartes conmigo también qué te estás celebrando este año. De lo muy grande a lo muy pequeño, qué te estás celebrando este año y cómo estás celebrando. No olvides de esto. So don't forget that part. Tell me what you're celebrating yourself for this year, but don't forget the how are you celebrating yourself. Don't just say the celebration, but actually what kind of celebration feels good to you. This has been an absolute pleasure to share this celebration with you. I've got more celebrating in mind. After all of this hard work, I am so looking forward to a road trip, getting out in nature, spending some time in our national parks. I hope they're open, and taking some true time off work to just enjoy life. And I'm really looking forward to doing that over the break and celebrating the holidays as well. I will see you after Christmas, so Merry Christmas. And I will see you in our next episode of Spanish Saturday next Saturday. Entonces, nos vemos después de la Navidad. Entonces, feliz Navidad. Nos vemos en el próximo episodio de Spanish Saturday. Y que tengas una fantástica semana celebrando. No olvides poner en los comentarios qué te estás celebrando y cómo te estás celebrando este año. I look forward to your comments. Buenas noches. Hasta el próximo. I'll see you next time. Good night.